Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I also appreciate your delaying this markup an hour so that we could all attend that classified briefing. I think it was important, and members on both sides were very interested in doing so. Vetting a nominee to the Federal Communications Commission is a serious task. The FCC is an agency with vast power over how Americans communicate and what information they access. It is also an agency with a history of abusing vague statutory provisions to pursue partisan policy goals. We know enough from today's extreme left what happens when power is put in the wrong hands. It doesn't take much to imagine a partisan FCC going down a dark path of attempting to censor what we see, hear, read, and ultimately think. As such, our responsibility as senators is to make sure that an FCC nominee not only has the expertise to be an independent regulator, but also possesses good judgment and temperament. The nominee must be fair, ethical, and perhaps most importantly, honest. On all of these fronts, this nominee has failed to meet the standard. There is a reason why we are on our third nomination hearing for Ms. Sohn. Both during this process and in her previous positions, she has shown herself to be a partisan who lacks the impartiality and candor necessary to serve in a leadership position at a powerful independent regulatory agency. And she has repeatedly displayed bad judgment and questionable ethics. She has associated herself repeatedly with the most radical views on the far left. I want to break down each of these points, but first let's recap how we got here. In March of 2020, Ms. Sohn joined the board of a streaming service called Locast, despite knowing that it was embroiled in a lawsuit arising from the group's piracy of broadcast content. The following year, the White House began vetting her for a spot on the FCC. During the vetting process, a reasonable individual might have stepped aside from Locast, but Ms. Sohn did not. Despite being considered to regulate the very same companies that were suing her organization for stealing from them, Ms. Sohn remained on Locast's board. Then in the fall of 2021, a federal judge found that Locast had engaged in illegal behavior, ordered it to stop operating, and awarded statutory damages of $32 million to the broadcasters. On October 26, 2021, President Biden announced his intent to nominate Ms. Sohn. Just one day later, Ms. Sohn signed an agreement settling the lawsuit. Ms. Sohn then hid significant details about the settlement from this committee. She actively misled senators about the settlement's dollar value and her ability to share settlement information with the committee. It's clear why. The settlement was a sweetheart deal. The broadcasters drastically reduced her organization's penalty by 98%, literally 2 cents on the dollar, from $32 million to $700,000. It was already improper that she executed a settlement with the broadcasters at the very same time she was being nominated to the FCC. But to then cut a sweetheart deal with them and to be dishonest with it, with members of this committee, is disqualifying. A basic requirement for public officials is trustworthiness. And on that front, Ms. Sohn has failed. If Ms. Sohn's brazen theft of intellectual property, her lack of candor, and her conflicts of interest weren't disqualifying on their own, then her long record of poor judgment should seal her fate. Just this past year, while her nomination was pending, Ms. Sohn was making multiple financial donations to senators who were charged with voting on her confirmation. Had this been done by a Republican nominee, I have no doubt that my Democrat colleagues and their media allies would be apoplectic at this point. But sadly, this level of unseemliness is a pattern with Ms. Sohn. She has engaged in extreme vitriol against her political opponents repeatedly, and she has endorsed far-left radicals' character assassination attempts against numerous Republican and Democrat senators, indeed multiple senators sitting on this committee. She has deep ties to far-left organizations, engages repeatedly in partisan attacks, and has also promoted anti-police views, For example, she retweeted and liked post by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling for defunding the police. And in July of 2020, during riots in Portland, Oregon, she retweeted a post attacking federal law enforcement officers as, quote, armed goons in riot gear with tear gas. It's no surprise that her nomination is opposed by multiple law enforcement groups, including the Fraternal Order of Police and the National Sheriff's Association. Ms. Sohn portrays herself as a defender of free speech, but she has a history of campaigning to censor conservatives. She calls Fox News, quote, dangerous to our democracy, and has urged the FCC to revoke Sinclair's broadcast licenses. At the same time, she has a history of fighting against indecency regulations that protect children from exposure to filth on TV. To Ms. Sohn, it seems that conservative speech is worse than obscenity. Madam Chairwoman, I do not believe this is a nomination that will earn the votes to be confirmed, and I do not believe her record is suitable to serve on the FCC.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.